to Vision Sunday. Welcome to Vision Sunday. A couple times a year, we take a break in whatever series we're in, and I spend the day talking about what I believe God is saying to me or to the leadership in this church, to the members in this church, or just really to the church in general, and talk about where I think God is leading us in the next season. So sometimes it can be different depending on what God's leading. Sometimes there's been big things like the Give Hope campaign and starting that off. Last January during Vision Sunday, we talked about fasting, and 102 people in our church did a 5-day, week-long fast in the middle of January, a no-food fast. It was just amazing. We're going to do that again this coming January. Why? Why would we do that? Because it's been powerful. Really see behind the scenes just how much God has just smoothed the path forward for our church this year and the breakthroughs that have taken place. So you can just start getting excited about the 15th of January, that week, Monday through Friday, 5 days of no food fasting together for our future. Yeah, we're not talking about today, but that's fun. So that's exciting. And if you don't think it's exciting, you haven't been paying attention probably to what has been going on. And just all the transitions and all the goodness that God's been bringing about in our church. So that was one. 24 months ago, during Vision Sunday, I talked about our strategic priority, God's strategic priority for our church, which was to focus for a season on refining, evaluating and refining and adjusting how we were seeing unbelievers give their lives to Jesus, whether it was starting Alpha courses or refining what we do on Sundays. We talked about that a couple years ago. I believe that God has clearly been speaking and confirming His current strategic purpose and priority for us as a church for this next season. I think it's going to be a lot shorter than the 24-month season that we have been focusing on. I'm not entirely sure how long this next season is going to last, but I do believe that God has clearly revealed His heart for us to focus on for this next season as a church, for His heart for us to take some next steps in as a church together. The good news is I guess the refreshing news is this isn't a major aggressive step forward. This is not we got a 50 million pound God calling bold step forward. He may call us to that someday, but that's not going on right now. This is going to be probably a simple season for us as a church, a simple vision season, and yet it's something that is going to require some attentiveness. It is going to require some intentionality, and it's going to require us to lean in a bit as individuals. I've noticed as I've led the church over the last, I don't know, however long the church has been around, about almost 13 years, 12 and a half years, that some seasons we take big steps forward, and they're exhausting, but they're big steps forward. And then we tend to go through a season of shoring up the basics, foundations, because you step forward and then you make sure that the foundations are strong so that you can take another step forward and make sure the foundations are strong. So this last season we've started Belfast, Rehope Belfast, pretty big, all within the last 8 months. We've sent out the Gathering Church in June here. Pretty big things over the last couple months, last 8 months. For this next season, this is what I believe God wants us to focus on as a church. Caring. One word, caring. Caring. Now, before I talk about caring, some of you might be wondering, okay, Brian, how do you come up with this stuff? like seriously, how do you come up with this? How do you get this clear sense of what God is calling us specifically to focus on in this season, and why are we to focus on caring more than anything else? Well, again, different seasons, God speaks in different ways all through His Bible. He leads in different ways. He speaks, and then He confirms it. Every time we come to a Vision Sunday, I'll talk to the elders and let's pray through this. I think that this is what God is saying, and He speaks and He confirms it in different ways. This particular time, God first told me about this season on the 24th of May this year in a dream. Now, pause, just so I don't lose anybody. God definitely speaks to me in dreams. The Bible says that old men will dream dreams. Yeah, that said, but also, for those of you who read the Bible, you also see other bits like in Jude, maybe, where you see warnings about teachers who are talking from their dreams. That you want to be careful about that because they were leading people astray. So I know that I'm going to be mentioning a dream, but this is how you want to assess anytime anybody talks about God speaking to a dream. First check, is it totally biblical? Absolutely biblical. Is it unshakably biblical? Is the way that it's being understood and applied completely in line with the Bible, God's holiness, His holy way? Is there a confirmation that this is what God has been saying and declaring? In the dream that I have, it very much ticks all these boxes. I know most of you weren't worried, but anyways, I'm going to tell you the dream. We're going to get to the Bible. I'm going to tell you the dream, and at least a brief part of the dream. I'm going to tell you the first bit of the dream, the bit that's relevant for right now. So, on the 24th of May, I had this dream about our church. So this is about a week and a half before Pentecost. And we were in a big airplane together, church. We were in a big airplane together. It was a huge commercial airliner, but instead of all the seats facing forward, who wants that? There was a big TV on the side, and we're kind of all around like in a big lounge, kind of a little bit like an RV, but a big lounge. We're all together there, and we're flying along, and I look out the window in this dream, and I realize, hey, we're not flying at 36,000 feet. We're flying at like 36 feet. And I can see the sea, like right there, like right out the window. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then our plane comes into a nice smooth landing on the sea, just like in all the movies. No, a nice, smooth, gentle landing. No big deal. Not a crash, not a crisis. A nice, smooth landing. Nobody's freaking out. And I look ahead at the cockpit of the plane, and I can see that our pilot's kind of passed out at this landing moment. So in the dream, what happens is I go to the door, and I open the door, and the life rafts unfold. They're yellow because that's what they are, because we've all seen them. Wait, no. Open up, the life rafts unfold, and get us all into these life rafts, and I'm on the left. And then I get out of the life raft, and I go back into the plane, and I start getting the food in the plane. It's safe. It's calm seas. Nobody's freaking out. Sun is out, but not too much out. We're from Scotland, right? And no sunburns here. So it's just nice, calm, peaceful. And I started getting food, and I started throwing it out the plane to you all. Now, I say food, it was mostly sodas, right? Mostly fizzy drinks, because that's sustaining. Anyway, so throwing that all out, and then as the dream continues, I look forward out the cockpit of the plane, and I see the pilot starting to wake up, and then it was like a zoom lens. If you've ever had like a manual zoom lens where you kind of zoom, this island just kind of zooms up to us, and we get out on this island, and I see the pilots starting to wake up. And the dream continues, and I think the dream goes on to talk about the next 4 seasons of our church, and maybe I'll share a little bit more at the members' meeting if people are interested in that. But that's the bit that's pertaining to this next season. And so I woke up with that dream, and I wrote it down, and I said, God, what is this about? Is this from you? Is this from you? What are you saying? And then what does this bit mean? What does this bit mean? What does this bit mean? And I felt very clearly that Regarding Hope was ending a season. That this idea of this plane, which we're all in, clearly signifying Regarding Hope, landing together on water, moving into a time of transition, lifeboats on the water, until all of a sudden a new season just zooms up and a new season begins, which I think was very, very, very clear through the rest of the dream that's pertaining to new location and new building and all that kind of stuff. But the relevant bit for now is that my focus in the dream I wasn't worried about all of that. It was a focus about caring, about just nobody freaking out, just feeding people soda and some food, which probably isn't super healthy on the airplane, but just feeding people, and that was to be the focus. So that was Wednesday. That was a Wednesday, 24th of May. On Friday of that day, so within 48 hours, I received news that we had reached our 50th salvation. For the last 2 years, I've been writing names in the back of my thinking book here, and writing names down as we've been trying. We felt like God was called us to see 50 people give their lives to Jesus. Well, within 48 hours of that dream, maybe about the next steps, we reached our 50th salvation. That Sunday, which was another 2 days, as days work, Friday to Sunday, I came here to church, and I'm like, God, okay, would you confirm, what is this, what is going on here? And it was unbelievable to me. I walk around this room often, and maybe you're too afraid of me, so we don't talk, but I say hi, and I just kind of circulate around. But this Sunday, people were more distraught than usual, and I found myself praying for so many more people. Were in tears, and I was praying for them after the service than the whole year combined. The whole year combined. And that was after the first service. And then the evening service, the same thing. Just people just in a difficult spot. I'm just wandering around praying for people. Just pray more than the whole year combined, even for the evening service. And then the next couple weeks, just praying and praying and praying for people. And I just felt God just confirming, Brian, now is a season for you to focus on simply caring and loving and caring for the people in this church, and just highlighting that to me. So Sunday after Sunday, starting just after the 24th of May, a new era began in our church. Now, you probably didn't notice it. But I definitely saw it. I saw worries, fears, anxieties, troubles, crises kind of bubbling to the surface, and a season of intentional caring needed and caring begun. And so then I asked myself the question, is it just me? Is this because sometimes in a dream, it's about me, but sometimes I represent us. And so through the summer, spent this season of prayer and discernment, speaking with the staff and the elders. I feel very confirmed that this season of caring isn't just about me, it's about us. In fact, it's God's new strategic priority for us to evaluate and take steps forward over this next season, now that 24-month season of focusing on evangelism is drawing to a close. Now, we're not stopping working on seeing unbelievers give their lives to Jesus, but our evaluative focus, our assessment focus is going to be leaning in on how good are we doing? How are we doing at caring for people in all these different ways? And how can we take next steps forward? If you're going to be at the members meeting in 2 weeks and 2 days, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that coming up. But today I want to just begin with the basics about caring, and what we see about caring in the Bible, what it looks like and what it might mean for us as a church and as individuals in this church in the days ahead. Now, I'm using this word caring instead of compassion or love. And I'm doing that hopefully for clarity's sake. I know that these words overlap and all that kind of stuff, but what I'm trying to communicate by using the word caring instead of love and compassion is caring being the ministry that outflows from a heart that's full of compassion or love. So we feel love and compassion, but then that outflows into caring. It wasn't like in the plane I was sitting out and looking at everybody in the life raft thinking, oh, I love these people. No, I'm thinking, it's soda time, right? It's fizzy drinks time, which is caring 101, at least in a dream. So anyway, the first story that came to my mind when it came to caring and carrying the Bible is the story about Jesus feeding the 5,000. But not necessarily the story of him feeding the 5,000, the context, the stories leading up to that moment where Jesus feeds the 5,000, specifically how it flows in Mark chapter 6 and a little bit in Matthew chapter 14. Let me remind you of the context of Jesus feeding the 5,000 men plus women and children, so 20 to 25,000 people. In Mark chapter 6, the stories leading up to it, the context of the story, begins with Jesus gathering his 12 disciples together, and then he says this to them in Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 7. It says, he summoned the 12 and began to send them out in pairs and gave them authority over unclean spirits. Skipping down to verse 12 and 13. So they went out, the 12, and preached that people should repent, and they were driving out many demons, anointing many sick people with olive oil, and healing them. Okay, so the context is these disciples have gone out. There's a major ministry work having taken place, an intense season. And then while all that is happening, John the Baptist is beheaded in this moment. He's beheaded, and we read about that story in Mark chapter 6 as it continues. But in Matthew chapter 14, we also read about it, but John 14 brings it very, very closely to the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And this is how it reads in Matthew chapter 14. In Matthew 14, verse 13, it says, when Jesus heard about it, which is the beheading of John the Baptist, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. Remember, John the Baptist is his cousin, to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. As he stepped ashore, he saw a huge crowd, felt compassion for them, and healed their sick. That's the day that he's going to be feeding the 5,000, at least that evening there. So Jesus, he felt compassion. His heart is full of love for the people, and so he feels this compassion on the inside, and it flows out in caring. In this case, healing the sick. If you're taking notes about caring today, our call to caring is about tangibly acting on our compassion. Tangibly acting on our compassion. That's the kind of caring that we're talking about today. The kind of caring that I'm saying we're called to take in this next step is not just this internal caring only. We do want to increase, how much we care for and love each other and the compassion we feel. We want that to increase. But like the dream, it's about actually acting on that compassion. Acting on that compassion. So there's two dynamics in this story of setting up Jesus feeding the 5,000. First, Jesus hears about his cousin's death, and then he wants to be alone. He wants to be alone, and so he withdrew. He is withdrawing because he wants to be alone, because he's hurting, because he's in pain, because he's sad, because he's grieving. He wants to be alone, and so he goes to a place where he can be alone. I don't know what you think about Jesus, but sometimes he just needs some space. And he really values that time just with his Father. Just with the Father. Maybe he would like people to encourage him in this moment. Care for him. His cousin just died. He wants to be alone. But then he gets there and all the crowds are there. And what does he do? Even though he's grieving, even though he's hurting, even though he wants to be alone, moved by compassion, he cares for the people. He cares for them by healing them. Now, there's a thought here about caring. We might think of ourselves in either one of two ways. As people who need people to care for us, or people who have capacity to care for other people. We think, I'm either this person who needs care or someone who can care for people. But what I love about this story is that's blurred together. Jesus would like to be alone. He probably needs some space, but instead, at a time maybe when he needs or would prefer care, he cares himself for the people. He could get to the other side and be like, great, 5,000 men plus women and children. They hear about my cousin's death. They are here to minister to me, to encourage me. It's not really what's going on here. One of my worries about talking about caring is that there's generally people who think of themselves in one of two different ways. I need care, or I can give care. And I worry that some people will hear this. Our church is going to be about caring, and they're going to be like, perfect. This is what I've been waiting for. Bring on the love. Bring on the love. I want to be cared for. Care for me, care for me, care for me. And I do hope that you do experience an increase of being cared for in this church. But this is also a message to you. You're like, I want people to care for me. Okay, but also I'm nudging you to be caring for people as well. Our call to caring is about caring for others even when we don't feel like it. Even when we don't feel like it. That's the next note. Our call to caring is about caring for others even when we don't feel like it. Even when we don't feel like we have the capacity for it. Even when we don't feel like we're very good at it. Caring is kind of like evangelism, right? We're called to tell people about Jesus, and some people are uniquely good, uniquely effective at evangelism, and yet we're all called to tell people about Jesus. The same is true with caring. Some people are really great at caring, but we're all called to care for people. Whether we're good at it or not so good at it, gifted at it or not so gifted at it, whether we feel lots of capacity for it or feeling a bit empty, we're called to care. And that brings me to one of my biggest mistakes in the leadership of this church, at least in the early days. Now you're awake and listening. I have some gifts. I have some strengths, so do you. Some gifts and strengths, but I also have some areas that I'm more rubbish in than others. Caring for people isn't necessarily my greatest strength. And did you just hear that gasp from absolutely nobody? Exactly. Nobody is shocked about that. Okay, that's fine. I mean, not everybody is great at everything. But if you were around in the early years, when I was leading the church, when I was like 28 and 29 and 30 and 31, just a few years ago, you may have heard some terrible phrases come out of my mouth. Phrases not limited to, but including, if you're looking for someone to care for you, you might be better off with a random phone number in a phone booth than coming to talk to me. Now, it wasn't the most caring of phrases, I understand, but my point is, when it came to caring for people, that wasn't necessarily my strong suit, but what the mistake that I made, a terrible mistake that I made, is I laid down an atmosphere that didn't care about caring, that didn't value caring. And I just confess that. The mistakes that you make in the early days, okay, you make them, you confess them, you say, God, I was wrong in this, and if that has a spiritual impact, which very often it does in a church and environment when the leadership does things like that, you say, you confess it, you say, I was wrong, and you say if there's still carryover impact, you break that off in Jesus' name. So I confess that to make sure we break that off, because that was a mistake. That was a mistake. Our call to caring, the next point is this, is for everyone, even if it's not something you're naturally good at. Even if it's not something you're naturally good at. Jesus is naturally good at this. Are his disciples? I don't know. I don't know if his disciples are naturally good at that. But I do know that I've grown in this area over the years, which, to be fair, it's not easy to go from 0 to 1. But growing, and I know that you can grow in this area too with a simple prayer. Father, give me your heart. Give me your love for the people in my life. Very simple prayer. God, give me your heart. Give me your love for the people in my life, for the people in my church. God enthusiastically loves to hear and answer that prayer. Give me your love for the people in my church, in my life. Okay, well, first, Jesus hears about his cousin's death. And then secondly, the disciples are in need of rest. They're exhausted. They're exhausted. And Jesus saw that. Back to Mark chapter 6. Remember, the disciples had been out doing ministry, and they've been doing ministry in pairs. And then we read this in Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. And Jesus said to them, come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while. For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. Okay, so then as the story goes, we get to that place of rest. There's huge crowds, and they spend the day ministering with Jesus all day long, and then it's evening time, and the disciples start encouraging Jesus to send them away. Because they're in a remote place and it's already late. And then you go into the feeding of the 5,000 story. Now, I could make the same point again, that these disciples are worn out, that they don't have a lot of capacity right now in their life from this last season. They're desperate for a time of rest. And then they've gone through another big day of caring for people. But we've already talked about caring even when we don't feel like it. And so for this bit, I also see this next point. Our call to caring includes people we don't know who need help from Jesus. You're seeing a crowd of 50,000 men plus women and children, 20 to 25,000. Many people that they just don't know. Now, our church isn't that size, but our church, it's a great time for us to connect with the people that we love and we care about. It's a great time. But it's also a great time to connect and care for people who Jesus has brought because he wants us to connect and care for them. People you don't know very well. I mean, I've heard some of your stories. Some of your stories, when you walked in this door, you needed comfort. You needed care. You needed someone to listen. You needed someone to encourage you. You were feeling empty. You were feeling burned out. You're feeling lost, confused, directionless. Friends, I believe Jesus brings people into this church who you don't know, into this place with the hope that you will care for them, that you will care for them, that you'll listen to them, that you'll encourage them, that you'll pray for them. People come in these doors needing help from Jesus, and that's your cue. That's your cue. Jesus brings them in, and as Jesus people, we get to be Jesus to them and care for them. In many classic church structures, and maybe you grew up in a church like this, many classic denominations, there's a belief that permeates the church that it's the minister's job to do all the caring. To do all the caring for the people in the church, that he or she would teach, that they would do all the hospital visits, that they would do the home visits, that they would do everything, that they would serve the communion, and that they would do all the baptisms and everything like that. Well, here we believe in the priesthood of all believers. That everyone who gives their lives to Jesus is commissioned to be about the work of Jesus, to be ministers of Jesus. That if you've given your life to Jesus, that you walk in these doors as a minister of Jesus. That you gather together as a minister of Jesus in this place. And so I encourage you to come to this place with that mindset. I am here as a minister. And I encourage you to come in these doors with this kind of you and who challenge. You and who challenge. As a minister, to challenge you to come in here and connect with people that you know and love, people that you care about, and people that you know, and also people who you don't know well. Like a mystery who, where you walk up to them and you're like, who are you? You know, That's sort of a thing. Connecting with people you know and you care about, but also people who you don't know. Now, my personal aim is to have my ears open in every conversation I have around here. Who can I pray for? Who can I encourage? Who is there a way that I can pray for this person or care for this person? I'm just kind of trying to push myself just for my own mindset, to make sure I'm praying for at least 3 people each service. And as I'm in conversations, how can I pray for this person? How can I encourage this person? As a minister, maybe as a minister coming in here, you might have that same mindset too. How can I pray for people in this church as I come to church today? How can I encourage people in this church? People I know, people I don't know. Which brings us to our next thought. Our call to caring takes intentionality. It's going to take intentionality. Jesus saw the crowds, and he made an intentional choice, moved with compassion, to care for them, to lean in and to walk around and to care for them. He wanted to be alone, but he pushed past that to care. When I walk in these doors, I have a choice. I can do my thing. I can get ready. I can smile. That's kind of half my job, right? Smiling, don't look terrified, right? Smile and teach and connect and all that kind of stuff. I can hang around people I know and know well, or I can continue, or I can be continuing to lean in and get to know more and more people, pray for more and more people who I don't know. That's true for me, but it takes intentionality for me, it takes intentionality for our staff, for our elders, but it also takes intentionality for us all. Now, originally when I mapped out this message, that was point 1. I realized by the time I'd written this message that I'm now kind of at the end of the message. And I didn't have time to, when I mapped it out, I was going to talk about all these different stories in the Bible where we see different kinds of caring in action. The story of like Elijah, who goes to the widow who only has food or enough flour and oil for a last meal for her and her son before they die. And I was going to talk about caring for people, even people who you don't know, generously, with a non-stinginess. That sometimes caring is costly, and we can see that in the Bible. I thought about some other stories where we're going to talk about caring with truth. And speaking maybe uncomfortable truth, but that can be caring. It can be what caring looks like. And we see Jesus do that and other people do that. Seeing stories about kindness and caring. Well, about caring with a real kindness. Talking about caring, I thought about talking about caring with the wisdom connected to caring. How it takes God's wisdom sometimes to know what kind of caring to apply. A lean-in, sacrificial, giving of yourself caring, or a little bit more of a stronger, hey, you need to take some steps yourself here kind of caring. You see all kinds of caring going on in the Bible. Sometimes Jesus is gentle with people. Sometimes he speaks hard truths. We're called to care, and what does that mean? Well, we look to Jesus to see what that means. And how does he apply this? And so I guess the last point I want to make, just looking at Jesus' life in general, is simply this. Our call to caring is about seeking what God's heart is for that person. That's what real caring is. You're going to have people you know, people you don't know well, people you're going to only hear half the truth from, maybe a quarter of the truth from. And so what we're doing for caring is seeing what God's heart is for the person in front of you. Again, back to the prayer. As you're listening, you're also praying, God, what is your heart for this person? Give me your heart for this person. And Father, how would you specifically want me to care for this person in front of me right now? With prayer? Do you want me to give them space? Does it require finances? Is caring for this person going to require more time than I have right now even, but more time? Is caring for this person going to require truth? God, is it going to require patience? Is it going to require listening? Is it going to require doing something or helping? God, what is your heart for this person in front of me? Give me your heart and help me know what to do. That's how Jesus lived his life. That's why sometimes caring for him looked different with different kinds of people. God, what is your heart for this person, and how do you want me to care for them? Every single relationship is different. So as we grow in this calling as a church to take next steps forward together in all different ways, as we grow in this area of caring together, we're going to need to quickly learn this simple prayer. Father, give me your heart for this person. Father, what do you want me to do in this situation? Which leads me to my 3 challenges for this week. Challenge number 1 is this. You and who, I talked about it. Challenge yourself when you come to church on Sundays to be intentional every time you come to have a good connect with someone who you know and you care about and pray for them or encourage them in some way, listen to them. But also try and have a good connection with someone who you don't know well, and care and pray for them. Challenge number 1. Man, that will have a powerful impact on our church and on our whole community here. It's going to be amazing. Secondly, regularly incorporate the line, Father, give me your love for the people in my life. Give me your love for the people in my life. And thirdly, practice today while talking to someone, praying silently, Father, give me your heart for this person, and what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Those